Homage to the fundamental teacher, Buddhist Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom, Mara, and Manjushri. Homage to all the benevolent lineage masters. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in millennials. Now that we are able to hear, study, and follow it, may we fully realize the Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all sentient beings. Let us generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let's continue with our study of homage and offerings to the 16 elders. More than 2,500 years ago, our root teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni, displayed the attainment of enlightenment, the turning of the Dharma well, and final entering into parinirvana to those who had a close karmic connection to him. Afterwards, the Buddha Dharma has been preserved and upheld by noble beings of both Mahayana and Theravada vehicles. These noble beings mainly consist of 8 great bodhisattvas of the Mahayana school and the 16 Arhats of the Theravada school, each accompanied by their retinue. This time, we will study how the Dharma has been sustained by sublime beings in different worlds through their miraculous powers and samadhi. Of course, people vary in their capacity and preference. Some people readily accept these stories without too much doubt. Even if they're not so familiar with the Dharma teachings, they can still understand the meaning behind the stories without being taught. However, other people, maybe due to little cultivation of the Dharma in their past lives, even though they may be highly intelligent about secular matters, seem to struggle when they study the Dharma. Even if they try to remember a few Buddhist stories or verses, they seem to have forgotten all about them in a few days. It seems that anything to do with Buddhism gets wiped out from their minds immediately. Such people need to purify their karmic obscurations and make an especially strong effort to study the Dharma. Even if they lack any connection to the Dharma from their previous lives, if they continue practicing, they can still transform their minds gradually. This applies to older people too. Even though they are no longer young, if they exert themselves in Buddhism training, they will reap the rewards of their hard work. I would like all of you to immerse yourself in the continuous study and practice of the Dharma. This is very important. Nowadays, many people seem to treat attending a Dharma teaching like going to a movie. They listen to one lecture, and if they're interested, they might continue, but if they feel bored, they will soon leave. However, Dharma study is not a short-term undertaking. You need to have an ongoing commitment to it. Currently, since there is a major Dharma assembly taking place here at Larangar, you might feel a little bit tired after the whole day's practice. But please bear in mind that the merit of collective study is boundless. If we didn't schedule the teaching in the evening, many of you would probably indulge yourselves in external distractions. You can be your own judge as to whether you are a conscientious student or one who lacks mindfulness. In general, without the supervision of a teacher, most students become sluggish and lazy. Therefore, please make an effort to attend the Dharma teaching every evening. We'll continue with our stories of the Arhats. The 11th verse states, "We pay homage to the elder Shatrapanthika, who dwells on Vulture Peak Mountain, surrounded by 1,900 Arhats, and makes the gesture of equanimity with his 2 hands. grant your blessing so that the life of the teacher may be secure and the teachings may flourish and spread. The 11th elder is called Shakyamuni, but is more commonly known by the name Chulapanthika. There are different pronunciations of this name. The latter one is more common and appears more frequently in the original Chinese Buddhist texts. We have learned his stories, which are recorded in many scriptures, and in the Buddhist canon, for example, in the Vinaya. Some of them have been made into animated films or other such media. So his stories are well known. But please keep in mind that I'm not sharing these stories with you just as some sort of entertainment, nor am I exaggerating them to try to impress you. Rather, we should absorb the profound meaning of those stories. Worldly people would learn traditional culture and ancient lifestyles through stories. In the same way, we can gain deep insights from these Buddhist stories. Some of these stories might stretch our imagination and seem too fantastical to be true. But many stories' plots can often have a great relevance to our daily lives. Back to the stanza. Here we pay homage to the elder Chulapanthika. Next line states, he dwells on Vulture Peak Mountain. This is where the Buddha turned the second Dharma well. He is surrounded by 1,600 Arhats and makes the gesture of equanimity with his two hands. I can't really see the text clearly. We should pray to him to grant his blessings so that the life of the teacher may be secure and the Netkar-like teachings may flourish and spread in this world. That's the aspiration we should make. Let's firstly learn about Chulapanthika's stories, which are recorded in sutras. During the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, there lived a Brahmin couple whose children all died as soon as they were born. The family suffered a lot of pain because of this. Later, a neighboring elderly lady told them how to keep the next baby alive. By the way, the literal meaning of Chulapanthika is little road, and today we will also learn the 13th Arhat, whose name is Mahapanthika, meaning great road. They're actually brothers. When Great Road was born, the elderly lady told the family how to keep him safe and well. She wrapped the newborn baby in a piece of white cloth and told the maid to take the child to a busy road intersection. Whenever she saw a Shramana or Brahmin pass by, she must ask for their blessing. If no accident had occurred by sunset, the child's life would be safe and secure. The maid then did exactly as told, and Great Road was safe and sound. When the second child was born, the family followed the same instruction. However, the maid was feeling tired this time, so she stood on a smaller junction that fewer people used. Still, shamanas, Brahmins, and other spiritual practitioners passed by. The maid then asked each of them to bless the child so that he would live long. They all gave their blessings as requested. Since the boy received blessing on a minor road, he was named Chalapanthaka, which means little road. When they grew up, the two brothers developed different intelligence and abilities. The big brother traveled away from home, became a monk, and attended Arhatwood. Before their father passed away, he asked Great Road to take care of Little Road. But the big brother left home and became a monk. From that moment onwards, the two brothers became separated. When they met again, Little Road was begging for a living. Great Road felt terrible and asked his younger brother whether he would like to become a monk. Before the passing of their father, the brothers studied a number of different subjects with their teacher. The big brother was remarkably smart and could memorize everything after one glance, but the little brother was very dull and couldn't remember a single passage that he was taught. The teacher commented that Great Road was very smart, but he cannot teach Little Road anymore. The father of the brothers then thought he can still survive because at least he comes from Brahmin caste. It's like how some adult children are still dependent on their parents, and their parents will just keep them at home and provide for them. After the father passed, when the two brothers met again, the Great Road asked Little Road whether he would like to become a monk. He replied, "Slow-witted as I am, how could the Buddhism accept me?" Of course, he was happy to take any arrangement as long as there was a roof over his head. Great Road had attended Arhatwood at that time. He said, Buddhism is for everyone, regardless of one's caste, wealth, or other criteria. Everyone is fully accepted in Buddhism. Then Little Road joined the Sangha. Normally, at the end of the summer retreat, each monastic was required to report their practice to their masters. However, during those 3 months, Little Road was unable to memorize the verse that he has been taught, no matter how hard he tried. So when the time came to report their process, others laughed at him because he was able to say anything. As a side, even if you're slower than others in Buddhist study, don't lose faith. After all, it's unlikely that we'll not be memorize one stanza in 3 months. We can at least memorize one stanza in 3 days or 3 hours. So we should do better than Little Road. Back to the story. At that time, the big brother entered into meditation to observe whether it's better to take a gentle or a harsh approach to tame his younger brother. He observed that an aggressive approach is better suited for a Little Road. So he scolded, "How stupid you are! You can't even memorize a single verse in 3 months. You are a shame to the whole Sangha." He then asked him to leave. Little Road was so heartbroken, he couldn't stop weeping because his brother told him that there's no hope for him to attain enlightenment or attain liberation. He thought, "I'm neither a good monk, nor can I support myself as a layman. Now that my brother has given up on me, what can I do with my life?" At that time, the Buddha passed by and asked him why he was crying. Little Road replied, "I'm so dull, and my brother asked me to leave. Now I don't know what to do." The Buddha then said, "Although your brother has attended arhatship, he is not the one who attended the holy Dharma after 3 Asamkhya-kalpas of training. I can say that you are completely capable of accomplishment. Come with me and study as I advise." So the Buddha took Little Road away and assigned Ananda to first teach him. Since Little Road was illiterate, Ananda started by teaching him the basics. After a while, Ananda sent him back to the Buddha, asking the Buddha to assign other duties to him because he cannot teach Little Road. The Buddha then told Little Road to repeat just one phrase: "Remove the dust, remove the impurities." However, he could not even remember this simple sentence. Observing this, the Buddha asked him to polish the shoes of all the monks. But many of the bhikkhus wouldn't allow him to touch their shoes. The Buddha then instructed the monks to allow Little Road to serve them so that he can accumulate merit and purify his obscurations. Afterwards, the bhikkhus allowed Little Road to serve them. Every day, Little Road would repeat this phrase while polishing their shoes. He was also assigned to sweep the floor. Through this method, his karmic obscurations were gradually diminished. As a result, he was able to remember this phrase and began to contemplate its inner and outer meaning. He realized that outer impurities refers to the dirt that requires physical cleaning, while inner impurities refers to the afflictive emotions that exist within our mind, the eradication of which is far more important. By following the Buddha's teaching and through subsequent contemplation and practice, Chulapantaka uprooted all his mental afflictions and attained arhathood. From this story, we should know the power of serving the Sangha. Most of us cannot attain certain enlightenment in the very beginning of our spiritual journeys. His Holiness Khenpo Sodargye said that when you first study the Sutrayana and Tantrayana practices, you might have no personal experiences, and to practice might seem to regress as you try harder. You should not feel frustrated. Instead, you should exert yourself to serving for the Sangha. For example, you are a Dharma master and have a hard time making progress in your practice. Then you can serve the Sangha through volunteer activities. Over the time, your karmic obscurations will be gradually purified. Then your wisdom will be revealed. So it's necessary for us to serve for the Sangha. In this story, through serving the Sangha, he attended the Arhathood.
这也是我们怎么讲呢？就是大家也要就是了解的一件这个事情。还有一个就是当时应该是在那个毗赖耶经当中讲的吧。
Also,
毗赖耶经
in the Mulasa Vastivada Vinaya, it's said that
对这个佛教呢，就是有一些
many non-Buddhists
说是像朱尼
criticized Buddhism
的人呢。
for accepting someone as dual-witted as literal to the Sangha. They said that the monastics must be full of unworthy types. This is the reason why Buddhism emphasizes the necessity of unimpaired sense faculties for monastics. A person with impaired faculties cannot be permitted to be ordained. Some Buddhists nowadays misinterpret the meaning of no attachment. They don't wash their hair, face, or clothes. In comparison, monastics are better, especially Han Chinese monastics. No matter which temple they're from, they always maintain proper manner and appearances. However, some Han Buddhist practitioners who have spent time in Tibetan regions seem to have regressed. After staying with a lama or in a monastery in the Tibetan regions, they became reckless when they returned to Han regions. They act as if they are an accomplished Mahasiddha like Master Qigong. Well, we can't deny that certain people have attained a high state in their practice and behave in this manner to benefit beings. Nevertheless, most ordinary people like myself are influenced by first impressions, while one's external appearances might not matter too much in the Tibetan regions, where water and sanitary supplies are difficult to come by. When we're in other regions, we should pay attention to our appearances and manners. This is very important. This way we can fit in with local customs and are accepted by others. Back to the story. At that time, many non-Buddhists started to slander Buddhism for having someone as dull as literal. By the way, because he was slow-witted, people also call him dumb-road. In order to counteract this slander, the Buddha asked Little Road to give teachings to the bhikkhunis. It was the custom that every 2 weeks a renowned bhikkhu would be assigned to give a teaching to the assembly of bhikkhunis. On this occasion, the Buddha told Ananda to inform the nuns that Chulapantaka would be giving them the next teaching. When they heard this, many of the bhikkhunis felt insulted because they knew that he had failed to memorize even a single verse in 3 months. Furthermore, there were many exceptional practitioners among them who excelled in Tripitaka. It felt absurd to have someone as famously dumb as Little Road to teach them. However, since the Buddha made this arrangement, they could not refuse. Within the Bhikkhuni Sangha, there were 12 mischievous nuns who made a secretive plan to humiliate him. They broadly advertised this teaching, saying that a very renowned master was becoming. They also set up a Dharma seat in the temple and raised it to a very high level without any staircases. When the time arrived, the audience was far larger than usual. As an Arhat, Chulapanthaka had no problem taking that Dharma seat. He then began giving Dharma teachings. Before, he could not even memorize a single stanza in 3 months, but at that time he delivered the teaching eloquently, as if 7 days and nights were not enough. The audience developed true faith in him. Through his teaching, many of those present attended the state of stream enter, once returner, non-returner, or arhathood, and some even generated the unsurpassable bodhicitta. There are also stories about Chulapanthaka in sutras such as Udanavarga and the Dharmapada. Since Chulapanthaka was famous for being so dumb-witted early on in his life, some people still look down upon him even after he attended Arhathood. At Larangar, some of our monastics might be well-respected Dharma teacher. Their family member failed to honor them. Ironically, the people most likely to look down upon monastics are their own family members. One day, Jivaka invited the Buddha and the Sangha for lunch, but didn't invite Chulapanthaka. When Jivaka first offered the Buddha some water, the Buddha refused and asked why Chulapanthaka hadn't been invited. Jivaka came up with some excuses. The Buddha then made it very clear that he wouldn't accept so much as a sip of water unless Chulapanthaka also present. Therefore, Jivaka ordered one of his servants to invite Chulapanthaka to lunch, but the servant went there with a scornful attitude. Foreseeing this, Chulapanthaka multiplied himself into 1,000 monks with the same appearance as him, who filled the entire forest, so the servant can't identify which one is the real Chulapanthaka. The servant went back disappointedly. The Buddha instructed the servant to return with true sincerity. The servant did so and returned with Chulapanthaka. Since Jivaka still doubted Chulapanthaka's ability, he arranged the seat located in the very end of the assembly for him. After finishing the meal, the Sangha would take back their bowls, usually beginning with the Buddha. In order to make Jivaka aware of Chulapanthaka's supreme qualities, the Buddha didn't take his bowl. Then Chulapanthaka, sitting far away at the end, miraculously took the Buddha's alms bowl. When the entire assembly saw this, including Jivaka, they were all astonished and generated great faith in Chulapanthaka. As we can see from Cholapanthaka's stories, people of his time were very much impressed by displays of miraculous powers. Actually, people today are not so much different. When they see someone demonstrates a supernatural power, they easily develop faith in them, as recorded in the sutras. Nevertheless, Buddha discouraged and even prohibited open display of miraculous powers. But accomplished masters, such as Arhats and bodhisattvas, are permitted to use miraculous powers if it's necessary for the benefit of other beings. Apart from that, normal monks and nuns are not allowed to display their power. I think it's good for us, because when people ask me, why don't you Buddhists demonstrate your supernatural powers? I always respond, the Buddha actually prohibited that. Of course, miraculous powers are difficult to achieve. Even the accomplished masters who possess the greatest supernatural power cannot demonstrate their abilities unless it's absolutely necessary. Such a restriction introduced by the Buddha can indeed prevent hostile attacks. Demonstrating supernatural power is not the ultimate means to liberate beings. The Buddha said, the greatest supernatural power is to guide people to realize the truth of all phenomena through teaching the Dharma. That's the best approach. Other approaches, such as flying in the sky or other exceptional abilities, may impress people due to their curiosity. This feeling of thinking this person is remarkable is temporary, but people can't truly benefit from this extraordinary displays through gaining the same power. So supernatural powers are less important. Many people nowadays talk about supercognition and claim to know your thoughts or what will happen in the future, just like fortune tellers. I'm not saying that divination and prediction have no use, but we shouldn't overly rely on them to the point that we become excessively anxious. As long as we act according to the karmic law, we don't need to worry about our future, since the virtual will lead us to happiness. If we commit negative acts, the resultant suffering will ripen upon us sooner or later. That's the natural law of cause and effect, which is non-deceiving. So during this course of our study, by reflecting the stories, we should develop insights and understanding. Next verse states, we pay homage to Bindola Bharavaja, who dwells on the eastern continent of Paravidaha, surrounded by 1,000 arhats, and holds a text and alms bowl. Grant your blessing so that the life of the teacher may be secure and the teachings may flourish and spread. Bindola Bharavaja appears frequently in Chinese Buddhist history. Many great masters, such as Master Daoxuan of Song Dynasty, have met Bindola in person. In Han Buddhism, there is a tradition of offering alms to 1,000 monks in places like Mount Wutai and other secret sites. It's said that on such occasions, Bindola will always come to receive the offering, usually appearing as an old monk. According to Chinese sources, a distinct feature of the older Bindola is his long eyebrows and white hair. Is it the same depiction in the Tibetan tradition? No long eyebrows? Well, maybe you can measure it.
宾陀罗尊者啊，就是宾陀罗尊者。其实宾陀罗尊者是我们这个，他是应该是这个突脱心啊，就是突脱心，就是也叫。
Bindola practiced the 13 austerities.
本来是这位这个啊，就是这个仪式呢，就是说
He dwells in the eastern continent of Paravitaha, or Paragotania. He is surrounded by 1,000 Arhats and holds a text and alms bowl. We pray for his blessing so that the life of the teacher may be secure and the teachings may flourish and spread. Stories about Pintala can be found in the Vinaya texts as well as the Kama Sutras. There it is said that he was the son of a minister. From birth, he was surrounded by wealth and led a very happy life. After growing up, Pintala recognized that worldly enjoyments such as wealth and so forth are pointless. Therefore, he took ordination and practiced diligently. Soon enough, he achieved arhathood. His attainment was fairly swift. Afterwards, Pintala gave Dharma teaching in many different places, upholding the 13 ascetic practices. Nowadays, in countries like Thailand, there are still practitioners in secluded mountains who continue this lifestyle. Why did Pintala remain in this world after the Buddha's parinirvana? One explanation is that it's to atone for his display of miraculous powers against the wishes of the Buddha. It's recorded in the Kama Sutra that once Anathapindika's daughter wished to make a grand offering to the Buddha and his retinue. However, she lived in another country and the people there didn't think it was possible. Summoning her immense faith in the Buddha, she faced the direction where the Buddha was staying and prayed sincerely that he could accept her invitation. The Buddha responded to her request and asked all the arhats with miraculous powers to attend the offering the next day. When the time came, the Buddha and the Sangha flew to receive her offering. At that time, the elder Pintala was sewing his monastic robe and had forgotten all about the invitation. See, even arhats can be forgetful, let alone as ordinary people. Some people scold others, saying, "How could you forget about it? You shouldn't." Well, there is no such thing as should or shouldn't. When you forget something, you forget it. Back to the story, when Pintala remembered the appointment, he looked with his power of clairvoyance and saw that the Buddha had already arrived and was about to receive the offering. Being worried, he quickly stuck the sewing needle into the ground, put on his robe, and began to fly into their direction. Since the thread from the robe was still attached to the needle, the entire mountain began uprooted and flew along behind him. This might sound like a fantastical myth to us, but this is exactly how it's recorded in Buddhist history. While Pintala was flying through the sky with the mountain following behind him, a pregnant lady saw this and became terrified. Tragically, she had a miscarriage and lost her baby. When Pintala arrived, the Buddha scolded him severely. First, you showed supernatural powers in front of others without a proper reason. Second, not only did you complete but you have also committed the act of killing. You have committed a very grave fault. After entering into nirvana, you will have to remain in this world to safeguard the Dharma. I guess the Buddha found a very good reason to require this good holder of the Dharma to remain in this world. This punishment is one of many stories about him. In the Dharma-gupta Vinaya, there is a story about Pindala and King Udina. Let me think about the details of this story. Pindala was teaching the Dharma somewhere. Well, there's a story, but I can't remember all the details regarding this story. Once Pindala was teaching Dharma somewhere, and the audience grew very fond of him. Soon, King Udina attended his lecture as well. For a long time, Pindala would never stand up to receive the king when he saw him coming. Finally, the king thought to himself, "I am the great king, but whenever I visit Pindala, he remains seated rather than stand up to welcome me, as if he were the highest among us all. Tomorrow morning I will visit him again. If he still doesn't rise to greet me, I will have him killed." The king was due the very next day. The great Arhats was well aware of his intentions and thought to himself, "If I stand up to greet the king as an ordinary being, he is undeserving of such respect, and the karmic effect of this will cause him to lose his crown. However, if I don't receive him with this formality, the king will kill an Arhat, which will cause him to fall into the hell realms." Pindala thought it would be better for the king to lose his throne rather than to fall into the hell realm. So as the king approached, Pindala climbed down from his seat and took 7 steps towards the king. Because of this, the king didn't kill him. However, the karmic results of this was not insignificant. 7 days later, while King Udina was out on a leisure trip, he was captured by another king and held prisoner for 7 years. After this calamity, he regained the throne. As we can see from this story, an ordinary being lacks the merit to be honored by a noble being. For example, to be ceremoniously greeted by a large number of monastics. When I accompanied His Holiness Khenpo Sodargye on his trips, one of the things that made me most uncomfortable was to follow behind him when he was being welcomed by a large sangha. For someone as highly accomplished as His Holiness, a mutual exchange of homage between sublime beings is fine. But for anyone walking behind him, as ordinary person like me, we certainly didn't deserve to be welcomed by a noble being. There is another story, which I told you before. In around 1988, a Gashilya of Gulu tradition from India visited Larangar. His Holiness praised this Gashi very highly and arranged a great assembly of the Sangha to welcome him. At that time, Larangar didn't have many dwellings.
从往那个我们这个往下面吧，就是我们现在的这个什么综合楼那一带的话，那全是空的吧。
From the Dharmapala building was an empty spot back then. There was a tuku who was very mindful of karmic law.
然后呢，他自己的是本来是跟
That tuku accompanied the Gashi to Larangar and led the way. As soon as he saw His Holiness and the Sangha ahead, he quietly moved to the back and entered the academy through another route. Later, we asked him, "We heard that you had come, but we couldn't find you anywhere. Why did you take another route?" He answered, "So many Sangha members came today. How could I allow myself to be welcomed by so many monastics and sublime beings when I'm such an undeserving man?" When we traveled elsewhere, we were always very concerned when groups of monastics come to greet us. But nowadays, many lay people seem to enjoy being greeted by the Sangha. I heard that often sponsors who make big donations to monasteries are welcomed by lines of monastics when they visit their temples, and they feel proud about it. This is wholly inappropriate. While it's admirable that lay people cultivate merit through generosity, when in the presence of monastics, lay people should maintain a humble attitude and be respectful. This is because at the very least, monastics wear the Dharma robe and represent the three jewels. On the other hand, monastics shouldn't be overly demanding. Some lay people have developed dislikes towards some monastics. Why is that? For example, when a monastic, soon after getting to know a layperson, immediately asks to borrow one of their homes and end up staying there for a very long time. Of course, you can always say that this is due to their karmic connection. However, it's important that monastics pay particular attention to the feelings of lay people when they associate with them. They should observe their facial expressions and reactions very closely so as to avoid any future problems. As lay people, you should be respectful to monastics, but act properly considering different situations and circumstances. In this story of Pendula, since he is a noble Arhat, the difference between an enlightened being and an ordinary person is huge. So the king should not have expected this great Arhat to rise and welcome him. It's said that the king could emit lights around him, but the lights faded and the ground cracked open, and he nearly fell into the crack before Pendula saved him. This is the case of karma ripening in the present life. The 13th verse states, "We pay homage to the noble elder Penthaka, who dwells in the heaven of 33, surrounded by 900 great Arhats, and makes the gesture of teaching the Dharma while holding a text to grant your blessings so that the life of the teacher may be secure and the teachings may flourish and spread." The older Penthaka is Mahapenthaka, who appeared earlier, the elder brother of Srila Penthaka. He dwells in the heaven of the 33 and is accompanied by 900 great Arhats. With his hands, he makes the mudra of teaching the Dharma while holding a text. We pray for his blessing so that all the Dharma teachers in this world may have a long life and the Dharma can spread and thrive. Penthaka was born into a Brahmin family and later grew to be a highly intelligent man. There were often 500 students following him. He taught them the Brahmin teachings and traditions. One day, the residents of the city heard that Moggallana and Shariputra, two of the Buddha's foremost disciples, were due to arrive. They all rushed out to hear their teachings. Penthaka inquired about their qualities. He learned that both had been born as Brahmins, the highest caste, but had renounced everything to become Buddhist monks. Penthaka was confused and couldn't make sense of their decision to give up their status and everything in order to take monastic vows. One of the students held Buddhism in high esteem and said to Penthaka, "You should go and listen to the teachings of Moggallana and Shariputra. They are great teachers." So Penthaka had this idea to go to their teaching in secret and listen to what they said. Later, he walked out of the city on his own. He ran into another bhikkhu who was practicing walking meditation under a tree. He was impressed by the bhikkhu's deportment and speech and asked the bhikkhu about the Buddha's teaching. The bhikkhu then introduced him to the 10 virtuous and 10 non-virtuous actions. After hearing this teaching, Penthaka felt a sense of conviction. Later, Penthaka revisited the bhikkhu, and this time he was taught the 12 links of dependent origination. After this teaching, Penthaka realized that the reality of samsara was quite different from what he had been taught previously, and that the Buddha offered a very different and profound view. He asked the bhikkhu if he could become a monk, and since he wished to join the Sangha in order to actualize the Buddha's teaching, the bhikkhu agreed and gave him ordination. The bhikkhu then taught Penthaka that there were two primary paths in Buddhism. One was to read and recite the sutras, and the other was to meditate on the teachings. This was taught by the Buddha. When you have time, it's good for you to read more scriptures. Nowadays, Buddhists seem to be unclear about this. For instance, civil servant, doctor, where another role has its respective duties. So does a Buddhist. Once you begin practicing Buddhism, the first thing you need to do is to listen to Dharma teaching and to reflect on what you hear. The second is to meditate and actualize those teachings. Back to the story. Penthaka practiced accordingly and attended arhathood. Then he had hundreds of his former disciples take refuge in Buddhism. Later, the Buddha instructed Panthaka to dwell in the heaven of 33 and to safeguard the Dharma through his miraculous powers. As modern-day Buddhists, some of us have a strong affinity to Buddhism and can fully accept each story. Others will remain neutral, while still others may react against or even feel offended by some of these views. Buddhism itself accepts and includes all types of being and all kinds of opinions. It's important that we analyze our thoughts very carefully, since our ordinary people are easily influenced by our subjective thoughts. And many of those are incorrect. What we consider to be pure may not be. What might think something exists without ever changing. For example, we saw a red pillar yesterday and thought it still exists the same way today and will do so tomorrow. So whenever we hear a new story or idea, we should think about it rationally before we jump into a quick conclusion. In Tibetan Buddhism, there was a great master called Khenpo. He said that people's minds are constantly changing from their youth up to their old age. So any thought that they have right now is unreliable. This is very true and applies to all of us. When we were little, we were attached to our toys. Then as we grew up, we discarded all those toys. When we are young, we are attached to certain people. But when we are more mature, their influence over us fades in midlife. We tend to cling to our careers and families. But as we grow older, we find that these things too are pointless. Finally, when we examine all the things that we have grasped onto during our lives, we find them to be devoid of any true meaning. The Buddha explained the illusory nature of all phenomena in many texts. If we realize this point, it counts as a form of enlightenment. This is why Buddhists, as they go deeper and deeper, find the Dharma teaching to be so inspiring. The truth is, wise people in the past and present all conclude that Buddhist teachings are a supreme and precious gift to humanity. My deepest wish is that every single being might understand something of the Buddhist teachings. We don't have to understand all the teachings. Just to grasp one aspect of them would bring immense benefits. Therefore, we pray to these sublime beings for their blessing, so that more and more Dharma teacher will appear in this world to expand the truth, and they will live long for the welfare of beings. To sincerely pray like this is itself an auspicious practice. That's all for today.
tamche zeba nye tona ni be jana panshi jirga na ji ra long chuba zhubum tsulen zhuwa zhu shu